Hello, everyone. We are continuing to read How to Be Your Own Therapist. All right, where do I start? This is a common question when I ask clients to tell me their story. First of all, I never ask for a detailed account of someone's life because I believe it can encourage rumination, deep thinking that can keep us stuck. Instead, I prefer a movie trailer version simply because I get more focus and less digression that way. This movie trailer version is archived by a process called a timeline, which happens in 4 stages. 1. Writing a first draft of your timeline, i.e. your life story. 2. Second edition, the rewrite. 3. Third edition, how did that feel? 4. Sharing your story with someone who will respect its richness. This structure will help you stay focused on the important aspects of your story and hopefully make this a cathartic experience for you. I am encouraging you to tell your story in a new way so that you can begin to assess its rationale from the outside. Sometimes we can get so emotionally invested in the way we're telling our story rather than the story itself that we can't step back and assess what's happened in a balanced, logical way. Likewise, it's not uncommon to completely disconnect yourself from the story or talk about it as if it happened to someone else. I once treated a 21-year-old client who, when I asked them to write their timeline, returned with a blank page saying they couldn't recall anything in their life worth recording. While I was aware this wasn't true, the blank page indicated that there was a lot of work on here. In fact, it acted as a good starting point. In a way, it truly represented the sense of emptiness and disconnection they felt when they thought about their life. However, unlike this client, you're being on your own therapist here. So it's important that you invest time into doing the work. This part of the process is where the gold is. So the more effort you put in, the more you'll get out of it. Stage 1, writing your first draft of your timeline, i.e. your life story. The only person qualified to write your story is you. No one else can accurately describe what it's like to... No one else can accurately describe what it has been like to live your life. While other people may be able to talk about the events of your life that they were aware of, no one else knows about all the private conversations, the quiet shared moments, or even which events have had the biggest impact on you. You are the expert on your story, so it needs to be told by you, and you alone, completely unedited, warts and all. It's entirely your decision how you decide to capture your story. Most people opt to write it down, but over the years I've seen drawings, painting, poetry, songs, and even a mini film. It doesn't matter which method you choose. The important point is that the story gets told. When recollecting the events of your life, I'd suggest you block out a few hours and go somewhere private where you won't be interrupted. Try to consider this exercise as an important event, almost like turning up for a big meeting that could have life-changing consequences. I suggest you choose a place that is comfortable and calming for you. Don't try to do this while the dog is jumping on you or when you're cooking dinner. This is your opportunity to carry out a piece of work that could have a powerful, positive impact on your life. You need to give it your undivided time and attention. If at any point while you're writing down your story becomes too distressing, then you can stop for a break, come back when you're ready. If you have concerns that it is simply going to be too difficult to do alone, then you can always seek the guidance of a professional therapist. While the process may be uncomfortable in parts, it's worth considering that anything worthwhile is rarely easy. As I'm guiding you through this process, I'm going to use the writing method, but you can amend it as needed if you decide to go down one of the other routes. How about an example before we start? Let's say you're 40 years old. You want to be reflecting over the key events of your life to date. From infancy to present, I suggest you approach the timeline in blocks of about 10 years. For example, 0 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 40. If you're unable to recall specific memories from a young age, that's okay. There may be family stories that involve you, but if you can't recall the memory, don't force it. This must be your account. Here's an example of what a timeline might look like. So everybody sees it? First, you're going to list all of the happy, joyful, celebratory, or positive events and periods in your life at the top of each box. This might be winning an award, the beginning of a new relationship and falling in love, landing a job, or doing well in an exam, a wonderful holiday, a time when all your hard work paid off, an amazing party, anything you felt life affirming. I strongly encourage you not to overthink or analyze what comes up. Simply allow the memory to surface and jot it down without judgment. Non-judgment and honesty are key here. In a separate box, you're going to do the same thing, but this time focusing on the sad, difficult, and negative memories. This could be a breakup, a bereavement, losing a job, failing at something, being bullied, illness, or something you're ashamed of having done. Inevitably, you'll be revisiting some of the uncomfortable moments that will make this part of the process more difficult. This is 100% normal, so please try not to panic if it doesn't feel good. Therapy can be challenging. Allowing yourself to access some of the darker parts of your experience will lead to growth. Or, as I sometimes like to say, crops can't grow without crap. Whether a negative or a positive memory, keep in mind that the people's opinion don't matter. For instance, if a memory comes up that for whatever reason invokes particular associations, perhaps where you were sad when a younger sibling came along, or happy when a mean grandparent died, note it down. Allow it to be as it is and not how you think others think it should be. Second edition, the rewrite. Once you've completed your first draft, I suggest you step away from the timeline for a day or two. Your brain will be processing all of the old memories you've dredged to the surface, and some new ones might emerge. After you've taken a couple of days, reread your timeline with these questions in mind. Does this read as a true, raw, authentic version of my story? Does it capture the moments of a struggle and pain? Have I sugar-coated some of the details or left events out? Have I been brutally honest with myself? Are these questions making you reconsider what you've written? Are there any memories you've missed the first time around or any gaps you need to fill? Does the order of events need tweaking? If so, feel free to edit your timeline, bearing in mind before you do that it's also fine to keep hold of a copy your original timeline. If you'd like to, it might be interesting to see how the story has changed. If some of your reflections don't fit neatly into the timeline, make a separate set of notes and put them in a safe place to revisit if you need to. Stage 3, third edition. How did that feel? So far, we focused on the details of your story, but this is about learning to become your own therapist. So you knew it was coming. We need to talk about those tricky feelings too. Before we go any further, I want to add a note about feelings. Many of us think feelings should be experienced, positive feelings all the time, and that negative feelings are a sign that something's wrong. This is partly because good feelings feel better, and partly because we're consistently told that we should have a positive mindset by social, online, and print media and commercial advertisers. But feeling good isn't possible all the time, because a life lived fully will always have difficult periods with plenty of negative emotions and moments upon which we can reflect and learn. And these negative emotions serve as a purpose, just as your positive emotions do. In fact, I like to think of our feelings as barometers, signposts back to steadiness. Life is a mixed bag of emotional experience, and that's how it's supposed to be. How can we appreciate the good times if we have no experience of the tough times? In short, all emotions are trying to help and guide you, rather than categorize them as good and bad. Instead, try to welcome them and see them as interesting. It's incredibly liberating. Let's bring this back to your timeline. It's worth pondering what feelings come up for you when you reflect on the events in the story of your life, both the first and the second edition. Perhaps reactions surprised you, or maybe there were emotions when you didn't feel what you expected to feel. Keep a note. Maybe with a different color pen, or the feelings that emerge when you call your important life events. I encourage you to be curious about the array of emotions that will surround the important points of your life. If you can't access these emotions for whatever reason, that's okay, so long as it helps you realize something about yourself. Perhaps that you disconnect from the certain feelings, or maybe it's hard to label some of your feelings, which is okay too, but that's something worth working on. Remember, at this stage, you're not trying anything with the feelings. You're just discovering what's there and following yourself to feel. Underneath the feeling, there might be some new information or an aha moment. But don't try to force it, just allow it to come naturally. I remember doing this exercise in my own therapy and uncovering something interesting. I recalled a memory as a young teenager when I got homesick on a school trip. I was very upset about being away from home, and this meant that a teacher had to drive me back to my parents. When I explored my emotions surrounding this event, I noticed that I felt embarrassed and ashamed when I'd previously thought I had just been anxious about being away. These emotions taught me my concern was about disappointing my parents, leading to a sense of embarrassment and shame. Fast forward a few years, and I realized that this was one seemingly trivial event contributed to me developing a belief that I needed to always see things through to avoid embarrassment or shame. It's fascinating that these feelings can teach us if we allow them to. We will talk more about what you can learn from your emotional responses to past events in Chapter 3 when we roadmap your story. But for now, be aware of the feelings and asking the questions. I wonder what that's about. All right, enough. The awareness will come. I strongly discourage you from overthinking, overanalyzing, or excessively thinking on the events of the past or your emotional responses during this exercise. Some memories will hold more weight than others. Some reactions won't make sense. A happy memory might evoke a sad emotion. A difficult memory might evoke a series of emotions or even a sense of numbness. There's no right or wrong response. Your emotions are what they are, but they will teach you something about who you are and how you respond to life. I can guarantee that. Alongside documenting your responses to specific past events, it might also be useful to reflect on how the overall experience devising your timeline might you feel. Here are some common responses I often hear. I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was rough. I tried to avoid it. I kept putting it off. I was keen to finish it quickly. I was hoping to avoid my past. It was incredibly surprising. I had buried so many memories. I'd forgotten many of the nice times. It was emotional. Your experience of sitting down to create your timeline can be as revealing as your emotional responses to events. So I feel a little irritated when I did mine because I was facing aspects of my life I had avoided for a long time. The irritation told me much about my avoidance. I realized I sometimes try to dodge facing up to the uncomfortable stuff in my life. Your own feelings during this exercise may not make as much sense to you right now, and that's completely okay. We're going to work on that part of the process in Chapter 3, when you map out your story and link it to your current life. All right. Thanks for listening.